Endgames are like little riddles, and today we're going to be solving one of every single endgame there is in chess. A knight endgame, a bishop endgame, a rook endgame, a queen endgame, a pawn endgame, and I'm throwing in a bishop versus knight endgame as well. That adds up to 6. See how many you could get. They're going to have a broad range of difficulty. We're going to start with the knight endgame because knights are my favorite and I just feel like doing that. And I wish more people loved endgames. You get a cup of tea, you just sip some tea, you try to solve a position. That's the beauty of life. No more talking, let's get into it. So this is white to move. Let me turn on the evaluation bar. As you can see, white is winning, but why? So the important thing about knight endgames is to play them as you would pawn endgames. I forget which famous grandmaster said that, but it is a great tip. Now you might be like, okay, I have more space in the position. I have a better king, but his king opposes mine and I can't get in. Where's the break? You might start to look for some routes, some sacrifices, though there are not any because the position is so locked. You might be starting to look, hey, can I wrap my knight around somewhere? Not really, because he could always just stop it in one move. So what do? Let's think about it like a pawn endgame. What do you wish you could do? You wish you can get your king to the 6th rank. What if I were to tell you you can? The move is knight to f8. You might be like, you can't seriously give up a whole knight when all you have is a knight. Well, actually, you could. Because a bad placed knight is very bad at stopping infiltration, and it's very awkward. It's almost worse than it not being there. So the point of knight f8 is it hits this pawn, so you don't want to lose that pawn because then you can make a queen. So black has to take. Now there are an even number of squares between the king. It is white to move. White has officially claimed the opposition. King to e6. And black's position from here on out is just paralyzed. I'll show you what he tried for. I'll show you how he still lost. If black is to move the knight, you are just simply going to pick up all the pawns. Literally all the pawns. They do not have a pass pawn. They do not have a quick way to pick this pawn up. And you are free to make as many queens as you would like. So I think this one is one of the more simple variations. What he went here is knight to g7. Now, if you are to take a pawn, which one should you take? You should not take the f pawn. You should take the d pawn. Because taking the d pawn creates a passed pawn. And they don't have a passed pawn, so you're chilling. You either take and go king c7 and escort your pawn, or this guy was a beast of a calculator and he just calculated out the win. He took the pawn. I'm sorry, that is a knight. He took the knight and went into this pawn endgame. But where do you put your king? You put it on e7, getting the opposition against black's king, that is. Now, it is a pawn race, but white does promote first. Black does not promote with check, which is sometimes annoying. And then you're able to improve the queen to f8, forcing the king to the side of the board. Now give another check, because now when the king moves, you take the pawn with a check. Now you're up a pawn, so trading will help. He closed it out with going king f7, and black resigned here. Why did black resign? You're threatening an assortment of mates. The only logical move I think he has is queen h5 check. And now you are just threatening mate and to run the pawn, and black has no checks. The only check there is this one, at which point you just trade, and it is a winning pawn endgame. You are up a pawn, that pawn becomes a queen, you win the game. So that was one of the trickier ones we are going to do. Knight endgames, fantastic. Who is going to find the better route? Oh boy, okay, Lasker's maneuver. Have you guys ever heard of this? When I was a kid, I've gotten this in about 3 games. I didn't know it the first time, so I didn't win. I knew it the next 2 times, so I did win, and that's what studying does. So this is a position, Lasker's maneuver that is a rook endgame where 2 pawns are 1 away from promoting. It is white to move, and white is going to win. How do you start? Okay, so you want to make this pawn into a queen, but how do you do that? You simply cannot go over here because they'll just go check and check you back in front of the pawn, right? And if they block with the rook, you just get a rook trade. Both sides make a queen. That is an easy draw. So the only way to attempt to win is going king b8, which stops black's king from improving itself. Now you are threatening to promote this pawn, so they cannot go king b6. Their only move is check. Now you're able to hide in front of black's king, gaining tempo, because they cannot improve, they cannot give a check, and again, you're threatening to promote the pawn. So their only move is to go rook c2, stopping the pawn from promoting. How do you use this advantageous setup of the kings to make progress, right? Incremental progress will lead you to victory. I stuttered. Not stuttered, did whatever that was. Gross. Rook to f6 check, forcing the king back. Black has two options. One loses immediately, one loses in just a little bit. Which one loses immediately? King to g5 loses immediately because the king just goes to g7. The king is obstructing the vision of the check. You're going to promote. Hopefully you know how to checkmate with the king and rook because that's what it's going to be. But if you do, then that's a win. So black has to go king h5. And again, white should now advance the king to where he can and threaten to promote the pawn. Black needs to go check. You hide behind the king. You might be like, hey, this is a cycle. Genius. This is cyclic in nature. Again, the rook has to stop the promotion of the pawn. You give a check. One loses immediately for the same reason. The other does not. Now you should go king to g7. King g6, that's the b file. King b7. King b6 also wins, but the reason king b7 is better is because you protect the pawn, threaten the promotion square, and get to the key square. King b6 just does two of those. You always want your pieces as active as possible because the more active your pieces, the more tied down your opponents. So it's just better to do three jobs when you can, right? Why do two when you could do three? Three is one more than two, I think. So king b7. Again, they have to give a check. You get to a6. They stop the pawn from promoting. You give a check. You might be like, all right, what is the point of this? Why are we doing this? Now you got to go king b6. You can only do two jobs. You're not threatening to promote, but hint, hint, you're threatening to take and make a queen. Deflection. Save that for later. The bar doesn't know what's happening. All right, we get rook to b2 check, king to a5. Again, they stop the pawn from promoting. You pin them. They go back. And how do you win? The point of marching this king all the way back to the second rank is that now you are able to take, right? Every other time you would take, they would just take this pawn, draw. This is no draw. Queen versus rook. Do you guys want me to make a video on this? It's only hard against the computer. I've never had trouble with it against people. You get the queen and king as close to the king as possible. The rook will have a hard time not to get forked. You get a fork. Hopefully you know how to checkmate with the queen and king versus king. So that is the rook endgame. Fascinating. Let's simmer down a little bit. Let's get a little easier. Queen versus pawn. I guess that's not a queen endgame. I'll do a queen endgame video. But it's kind of a queen endgame. I mean, it's a queen versus a pawn. It's an imbalance. It's a queen that might versus a queen, but it shouldn't. Do you know how to win this? You use the zigzag or the staircase method. So the winning idea is to get white's king in front of the pawn so that the pawn cannot promote. Then you don't need to give a check. You can improve your king. So once you get their king in front of the pawn, you improve your king. Repeat the process, improve the king, and there will be mate or you will pick up the pawn. So the easiest way to do this is just to zigzag. Get closer and closer to white's king. Get closer and closer to white's king. And here, if they go king to d8, you step in and you see they move their king. You're going to win the game. So what if they go king f7? Well, now you do not need to give a check because you've successfully split their king and their pawn. So the queen goes to d6. The king has to go to e8 to guard the pawn. This pawn is going up, not down. So you can go queen e6 check. If the king goes that way, you win the pawn. The king steps in front. And this leads you to the winning position. Right? Check. Again, they're split. Or they go here. I hope everybody can win this position. This will be checkmate. Just shortly. One key note in this position is that it is winning on the D, the E, the G, and the B file. So on the knight files and on the central files, it's a win. On the rook files and the bishop files, it is a draw because you cannot force the opponent's king in front of the pawn because of the stalemate trick, right? You can envision like boop, 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 takes, stalemate. I hope that made sense. Okay, so that's the queen endgame. Let's save the pawn endgame. Let us do the bishop endgame. So this is actually my endgame that I got in Blitz yesterday. We're short on time. I'm facing an IM, and I hate bishop endgames. They're my least favorite endgames. I always seem to get outplayed in them. So that's what I need to put emphasis in my studies on. But I was very proud of this. How do you draw this as white? It's very hard to hold as black. Okay, the move is, okay, we went h6. They go c3. What's the move? It's a brilliant move. You might be saying pawn to h7, and I just make a queen. But it's actually not so easy, because after promote, they promote with check. It's always an unfortunate happening when they promote with check. And they're simply winning because they have the tempo. They have more pawns than I do, and they have more passed pawns, that is. So what do? The only move to draw is bishop takes d4. Have you ever seen the Searching for Bobby Fischer movie? It's kind of like that, right? So in this position, my opponent actually did take the bishop, time pressure. But now h7, and you're going to promote with check. My opponent took, I promoted. He had to move his king. Where did he move it? He moved it to c4, take, and it's an easy conversion from there on out. So how does black draw this? Well, it's amazing. Pawn to c2, and I did calculate this. I would go bishop to e3 because that is a dark square. And now they have to go g5, which is a ridiculous move. The point is king takes, king to e4, and they're just in time, right? If I push the pawn, they're going to take, and now they're going to promote, and they have more material than you. It's crazy that this is losing, but it just is because it's a discovered check, and they're going to pick up that pawn. So that's kind of filthy, to be honest. So instead of pushing the pawn, you go bishop c1, but now they're able to go bishop f5, and this would have been the hold for black. So that was a very cool endgame. Proud of that one. Let's get to the next one. All right, knight versus bishop, and then we'll end with an easier pawn endgame. So this is a good knight versus a bad bishop because that bishop is super tied down and immovable. You might be thinking this is too easy. Well, it's really not. Because the problem is if you ever win this pawn, it's just a draw. Not only because black claims the opposition, right? The king cannot make progress now. Sorry, if it was black to move, it could. So you just follow the king. When they push, you get in front of the pawn. They push, you stay in front of the pawn. And when they try to infiltrate, you deny them. And then you get the famous stalemate position. So you really just can't even win the pawn. And the other funny thing is if you are to win the pawn, I can even go here and it's still a draw because my bishop will be able to sack itself for the pawn one day. And can a king and a knight checkmate? No. That is not enough material. All right, so how do we win? What ties down black's position? Well, I had to check if I was recording real quick. King to h6 ties down black's position because he can't move the king out because we win the bishop. So he has to go king h8. And now it's fascinating because basically you cannot allow the bishop to get to g8 because then it has this long diagonal. And even if you win the pawn again, it'll sack itself for white's pawn one day and it'll be a draw due to a insufficient amount of material. So the move here is knight to h4. The reason this is a beautiful move is if the bishop tries to get out, then you can checkmate with them with just a king and a knight because the bishop is obscuring the vision of black's king. So it forces them to go g8. So basically, anytime their bishop cannot move, you improve their knight. And every time their king is on h8, which it has to go, and their bishop wants to go to g8, you improve the knight, threatening g6 mate. What I mean by all that blabbering is you go knight f3. The point is, their only move is king h8 to not lose the bishop. But now you go knight e5. You've centralized your knight. And again, if bishop g8, it's just checkmate. That rhymed. So they have to go king g8. Now you don't need a cg6, so you can improve your knight again. Again, they have to move their king to h8 to guard the bishop. And knight f8 is just Zook's one. Because if they move the king, they lose the bishop. Their only other legal move is bishop g8, which they get checkmated. So can you believe, with just this amount of material, you're winning? It's never too late to win a chess game. It's never too late to lose a chess game. This is a beautiful puzzle because there's only 4 points of material on the board, and you're winning with a knight. So if you're more active, do not accept the draw, even if material is balanced. All right, who's ready for a pawn endgame? This is an easier one, but it's a good one. So this is a symmetrical position. You might be like, black's king is trapping in my king on the first rank. How could I be winning? The box method, geometry. This pawn on e5 is your most beautiful pawn, I would say. And this is the promotion box, right? You do a diagonal, a vertical, a boop, boop, boop in your head, obviously. And that's the box. Can black's king step into the box? No. That's why you're winning. You don't want to waste a move and allow him to step into the box, right? Like if you go king b1, king b4, now it's a draw because he's in the box. That would be tragic. So what do you do? Well, there's two winning moves, g5 or f5. I like f5 better because if they take, king b4, again, they're too slow because they weren't in the box. All right, this is the box now. They're always one too slow. They were one too slow to start. They're one too slow to finish. So what else could they do? Well, they might try to go into the box like so. And then you win with g5. I love this. When you get this brick wall of pawns and it overwhelms black's structure. Now there's a little bit to calculate, but if they take this way, you go g6 and you overwhelm black's f pawn. Right, so takes, push. You might be like, black has 4 pawns. Don't think like that. The king is so far out, you're going to win all of them. What else could they do? Well, if they take this way, how do you overwhelm them? You go pawn to f6, and it's the same thing. Takes, push, I don't think we need to review this because the pawns just don't defend each other. Say like f5. Okay, now I'm reviewing it, but they're too far from making a queen. You get the point. White is winning. So we did one of every endgame today, except maybe a queen versus queen. If you guys like these videos, I love endgames. Personally, they're my favorite. They're my cup of tea. I could do this all day, every day. But how many did you guys get correct? Thank you as always for watching. See you tomorrow. Have a great one. Peace.